How we all doing? So, I'm going to be talking today about sourcing for your reselling venture. And it really doesn't matter what you're doing. I do toys, board games, and video games. If you're doing clothes, shoes, electronics, uh, home goods, anything small to medium size, this pretty much going to pertain to you. Um, no matter what your knowledge level is on what you're dealing with, you have to be able to find it to add it to inventory to sell it. So I'm going to go over 5 places that you would go to source inventory and the pros and cons of each. So first one, big chain thrift stores. I do probably 95% of my sourcing here just based on the ease of getting to these for me. I have one 10 minutes from my house. I have another one that I'm frequently nearby due to work. And this works for me. And looking at pros and cons, pros are intake and restock. When you consider the scope of the big chain thrift stores, locally we have Goodwill and we have Savers, and they're very different. Goodwill, their intake involves dumpsters that you deposit your goods into, and they have at-store donations. And they cycle through stuff quickly, they get it stocked, they have a great system where they stock items, move them. And because the intake is so easy for people dropping things off, they just bring in more than most other places. The other big upside to these big chain places is coupons. They run deals. They run tag deals all the time. They, at least Goodwill has a club that saves you 5% or 25% off over 100. Plus, they'll throw you text coupons every once in a while. It adds up if you're doing this full time. Just 5%. If you're bringing in $5,000 worth of inventory, that's a decent chunk of change. The cons are that if you are reselling and you are sourcing from these places, so is everyone else. Because they're easy, there's in particular areas they have set hours, they don't go anywhere, and they always have stuff coming in. You will begin to notice who is a reseller. You'll see the same people when you go in sometimes. You'll see how people pick things up and look at them. I've gone into places and walked by somebody with a cart, and I look at it and I might as well just leave. The guy already picked this whole thing clean. So the pros bring in that con of a competitive nature within resellers. The other con is they have an organized sorting system. And what this means is it's not to say you will never get a holy grail going in there, but they have people whose job it is to sort all of this stuff. And these people will pick things out and send them out to, they have their own reselling hubs, effectively. Things that are really, really nice will never make it on the floor. Even if they do, they will make it on the floor as the premium home goods. I'm not sure what Savers calls theirs, but Goodwill calls theirs hand-picked. And this is going to have a premium price tag, and it's not really going to be obtainable. Stuff does slip through the cracks occasionally, but your sourcing, while good, will never really be this $2 and I can sell this for $5,000 or whatever the pipe dreams that you have at other types of places are. The next one we're going to talk about, small thrift / charity shops. These are usually non-profit or independently owned thrift stores. And they come in a couple of varieties. So the pros, pricing. If you find certain ones, especially the non-profits, their pricing is ludicrously cheap. You're talking $1 for almost everything, a couple of bucks for obviously premium items. And the pricing can be weird. An example is I have a non-profit thrift store near me that every video game they get is $7. That's just what they decided. If you have Madden 2012 for Xbox 360, it's $7. If you have stadium games for the NES, it's $7. So it works to your advantage, but other times it actually kind of hinders you, and I typically don't look at that section because it's usually a waste of time. And that leads to the next thing, random intake. They don't have that, like, they don't cast the wide net. They don't have the dumpsters. They don't have the kind of ability to bring in tons and tons of stuff. What they get is just odd things. And that can be really cool because they can get stuff that's outrageously rare and priced low. Doesn't happen all the time. You can't expect to go in every day and see, a G1 Transformer on the shelf, but it happens. I've gotten things that I've flipped for 50 times what I paid for it. Not reliably, but it happens, and it happens at these places more so than most other situations where you will be sourcing your inventory. The other pro, unlike the big chain stores, these tend to be non-competitive, and I don't know why. I think it might be because you're going to leave empty-handed more often than not with these smaller ones. It also doesn't take as much time. You go in, if you're in there for 5 minutes, what's 5 minutes of your life actually worth? But I tend to almost never see resellers at these types of places. The cons, while the pricing is a pro, it can be a con. And the reason for this is there is the other side of the scenario where people open thrift shops and they don't really understand what they're doing. It's not for charity, it's a business. And they just make wild assumptions on items. Everything's $10, everything's $15, everything's retail price. And unfortunately, both thrift stores tend to have like a pretty short lifespan. Usually these places are up and gone in like 2 or 3 years. But you run into ones that it could be exciting. You find a new one, you go in, you look at a price tag, and you're like, there's no money here. This is more than you would ever pay for this item. And being as these places tend to be tucked away, tend to be small, they have a low flow. So if you check them out early in the week, chances are they're really not going to have that much until later in the week. It's, the box stores you could pop in every day. And if you pop in late enough every day, they've already restocked for the day. And there's new stuff. Smaller thrift shops just tend not to be able to process even what they do get in small quantities to put it out. So it's something that I like to pop in like once or twice a week, the local one. And mine's expanding to be bigger, and I'm hoping that's going to be a good thing. But the next one is yard sales. And these are their own thing. And this is like the original thrifters sanctuary. So, the pros to yard sales are you can make deals with people. And this is kind of getting into a completely different skill set. This is sales. I'm from sales. I do well at this. And you have to understand who you're dealing with. With thrift shops, they're either a charity or they're a for-profit business where the person you're dealing with often doesn't really have a say in anything. They can't mark something down. You can possibly argue a price if you would like, but it's really not going to get you anywhere. Yard sales, totally different animal. The one thing people running a yard sale don't want to do is bring all this stuff back in their house when they're done. They've already pulled it out of closets, out of attics, out of basements. They don't want to truck it back downstairs. And oftentimes people that run yard sales, the next day, all that stuff's going to be free. They're going to take money for it. I highly recommend if you get into yard sales, if you're getting into reselling and you want to really hit yard sales this spring and summer, bring a lot of cash and be ready to throw out some quick numbers, and you will get fantastic deals on bulk purchases because people will be willing to just take that large sum of money, disregard whatever pricing scheme they had because, oh good, this stuff's gone. Buy the whole table. Figure it out down the road. Tactically, what I do is I usually look at the table and I kind of pick out like the 3 best pieces there, and I determine what my break even would be on that. And that's my number. Shoot your shot. And that leads into strong items. People that do yard sales, they tend to have really nice stuff. It can be trash, especially older people that like do a yard sale like every month. You know, it's picked over garbage, but you can find some fantastic stuff at yard sales. I've found items I've sold for hundreds of dollars at yard sales that I sourced for like a reasonable price. And I didn't include it as a pro or a con. Just as a life skill in general, treat people well in these situations. You don't have to beat everybody up on stuff. And the yard sale doesn't matter quite as much, but the other stuff we're going to talk about, it does matter. What I do at yard sales, and you can roll however you want, but I say, would you be happy with this price? If they're happy, I'm happy, and I'm throwing out a price that I think is reasonable, that I'm going to definitely make money on, but I want to make sure that they don't feel like I beat them up over something or bullied them over something. I've given people extra money at times. I went to a yard sale once. They had a Wii U still in the box with 7 games, and they wanted $25 for it. I offered them $100. We settled on $40. They were confused. I was elated. I think I sold everything for $400 eventually. But there's a relationship component to doing this as well. These people will have yard sales down the road again, perhaps. If you don't beat them up on pricing up front, you can sometimes make deals and say, hey, you know what? Here's my number. Anything you have left over, give me a call. I'll come back before you move it along, and maybe we can set up something else. You treat people well, they will treat you well in return. So the cons of yard sales are kind of the obvious. It's a yard sale and it's on for 3 hours on this day. And that can get tough because they're always Saturday, 8 a.m. to like 2. So you got to pick which ones you're going to, pick areas, and time consuming. They're not going to have a bunch of yard sales in a row downtown. Some towns do town-wide yard sales and they're cool, but you're going to be going to places that are not really near each other, and you're going to be spending time parking a car, getting out, and sifting through unorganized stuff a lot of times. I've gotten great stuff at yard sales. I've wasted lots of time going to yard sales. At this juncture, I really just kind of stop if I'm driving by. I don't typically have a plan. If I'm driving by somewhere on a weekend, I see a yard sale, I just stop. If it takes me 10 minutes, it takes me 10 minutes, but you never know what you're going to get. Like I said, I've gotten things I've sold for hundreds of dollars for, $10 easily. And I've done that at some yard sales. I got $400 worth of, or I spent $400 at a yard sale a couple of years ago. I'm still parting it out, and my profit is going to be $1,500. You can triple your money in 2 years. I'm totally fine with that. So next up we have pawn and consignment shop. Of all the types of sourcing I do, I really don't do this. And the pros and cons are that pawn shops and consignment shops have strong items. But the con is that everybody involved knows that already. I will pop into new pawn and consignment shops just to feel them out, and I've gotten great deals on pawn shops that were gone in 6 months because that guy or gal had not a clue what they were doing. But the thing with consignment and pawn, unlike thrifting, is that you have a person providing this item and they are talking it up through the roof because they're being compensated for it. You don't get surprises at places like this almost ever, because the person that brought it in is trying to get max value out of it, and then there's that back and forth with the owner, and then that guy's going to try to recoup max value out of it. So the one thing that you could do besides checking in new ones and seeing if they have any idea what they're doing is some of the older ones will have stuff on the shelf forever. And supply and demand in play here. Sometimes the demand on an item has increased significantly since they threw it on the shelf and forgot about it years ago. And you can make deals with them sometimes. You grab something off a shelf that it wasn't that big of a deal when they took it in, but now it kind of like picked up. You know, My Little Ponies went through this. Different media forms will just gain popularity in the age of streaming. Then you can bring it up to the counter and just shoot your shot. You're probably not going to make a ton of money, but if you're looking to source very specific things like video games and you just want to bulk up your inventory on this stuff, this isn't a bad way to go. If you can make a deal with the pawn shop and get, make a buck or two, but flesh out your inventory, especially when you first start, it's not a bad way to go. And lastly, Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist. So this one's kind of cool. I've gotten more into this. It's tough, but what you could do with Facebook Marketplace is use Google Lens. I did this recently with a big Transformers haul that I did over the course of a week. Because they're putting up pictures of the item on your computer, you could take those pictures if you're doing big lots of things or you're not sure. It might be a spread, for instance. You could do this with the yard sales too, but it's tougher. Throw it into Google Lens and see what all those things are. And you can kind of calculate right off the bat if this is going to be worth your while. And again, deals. People are putting this up because they don't want it. They want it gone. If you message people and say, hey, I live nearby, I'm in this area, I can come this time to this time, cash in hand, let me know. They've already kind of halfway thrown this stuff out of their house. They'd be fine to get rid of it. And sometimes you can make deals. We circle back again. Treat people well. If you beat people up on stuff, they're not going to want to deal with you again. If you give people a great price, at the end of transactions, I always say, hey, if you have anything else you're looking to get rid of like this, just reach out to me. That way they don't have to deal with other people they're not familiar with. We already had a good back and forth transaction. They're more inclined to reach out to me directly without listing it. It takes all the competitive nature out of it, and sometimes we just work out a deal. The con on Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, the people that do this are already computer savvy. They're going to look this stuff up before they list it and get an idea of what it's worth. They're already on the computer doing it. So you're not going to get a lot of really great stuff doing this. You can, but you're going to pay for it. So don't expect to see outrageous stuff for cheap. It's actually going to be a scam almost every time. You can kind of tell that'll be the not so much with what I deal with, but you'd see like grills, $20 for a $2,000 grill, and they're just trying to steal money from you. They're going to be informed on what they have. They're already on the computer, but the other con is meetups. The people you deal with, this is not their job. They're busy just like you. It can be really difficult to not only go to these places or to go between, figure out when you're going to do this, how you're going to do this. And it can be a hassle. When you look at like thrift shops where it has posted hours, it's easy to get to. Sometimes it's tough to deal with people, and especially like if people blow you off. It kind of sours you to it. That plays into that whole pros. If you have a good transaction with somebody, they are more apt to just deal with you directly than ever deal with half of the people flaking out on stuff or lowballing or not having the money. So those are the 5 I deal with. There is a 6th, and that is flea markets. And quite frankly, I've never actually been to one. We don't really do them around here. I'm in New England. We have really crappy falls, crappy winters. And most of the flea markets locally are not truly flea markets. They're people like running like Wish.com, Temu style, like cheap goods. So hey, let me know if you have a lot of success at flea markets and what do they call them overseas, like boot parties or something, trunk parties. Let me know how that goes. But that's my 5 places that I source, that I have success, and how I do it. Thank you all for watching. We got lots of cool stuff coming up this week. A lot of Funko Pops I picked up that I'm going to be going through. Some really nice toys. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.